Alright, so by this time you should have reviewed all the basic theory videos that I put on this channel and gone through all the videos up to this point and watched them a couple times, some of them, made some good notes about what you learned, and then have gone back through it and organized it a little bit better in a way that's, functional for you. I'm an organizational kind of nutcase on that because I like things organized, but sometimes that, people will see that they want things organized a little bit differently for them to find it. So you might want to organize it so that it's easy for you to find what you want. One thing before we go on is that, when you get to a point where you have enough music theory to do what you want, and you've got a pretty good understanding of the basic concepts that we've been talking about, and you don't really need a lot more. You want to play like some real simple 3-chord country songs, and you don't want it to get too real complicated. You don't want to worry about a whole bunch of scales or a bunch of different progressions, or there's a whole lot of it that you just don't want to get too deep into because you want to keep things very simple, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I've had people that'll come along and they basically just want to be able to strum a few chords and sing some very simple gospel music or simple country tunes, older simple country tunes. And I've had people come, they want to be, like the next Bach or Beethoven, and there's a whole different level of time needed to be spent studying theory and, and the concepts that can be related and used in music. That's a huge thing to get into your head. When you get to a point, you have a really good understanding what you want to do. At that point, you should ask yourself and ask somebody, this is kind of what I want to do. What do I really need to know to do this? But, to have a good understanding of what is out there can really help you in understanding how far you need to take it to do what you want to do. That's a huge concept to get in your head. So hopefully at this point you've went back and watched those first videos, and you've watched these videos on advanced theory, and I hope that it was very clear to you that we were not getting real technical about it. I was trying to lay some basic concepts on you, and I may have rambled on a little bit so that those basic concepts would sink into your head in a very simplistic way. It didn't seem like theory, it didn't seem like math, it didn't seem like anything like that. The concepts were very easily related to a very layman term kind of perspective. That way, for two reasons. The first reason, if you understand some of those basic concepts and can fly with that, and you're good to go, and you might dig around a little bit to kind of do some other stuff, that's cool. And if you're going to go farther and really get into some serious advanced theory, that to have those layman term concepts in your head with a basic understanding of that before you progress into a lot of the theory is really helpful, because you have a basic understanding right now in your bag, and as you start to understand those concepts in a more complex way, that you can relate to them easier. I hope that makes sense, because theory can be very hard that way. What do I need to teach you for what you want to do? That can be a very difficult concept. Some people will study theory for years and years and years and years. Some people will study theory for a very short period of time, understand the very basics. They pick up their acoustic guitar, their piano, and they're off. They're not going any farther with it. They don't care. They're just experimenting around until they get it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Music, it was to create and make something beautiful, or something intriguing, or, to voice some kind of emotion or something you were feeling or something like that. So there's nothing wrong with that. I wanted to make that very clear. The next thing I want to address really quick is, those concepts that you already understand, that those are huge tools for two reasons. First, or for two things, maybe three or four, a bunch of things, but basically for trying to construct and compose music with some basic concepts of what you can use to do that, and to deconstruct other people's music, so that if you're listening to something else that you can start picking up your little piano or your guitar and start playing the notes in there, trying to figure out what keys in and the melody, and have some understanding of what's going on there, so that you can, look at it from, a perspective that, he may have been working with some of this theory and use the theory to help you understand what they were trying to do, to search out what's happening, and to help you work through ideas you have. Sometimes you'll get a chord that's not in scale or anything like that, but you're trying to get back into key, or you're trying to modulate, or, you're going to some other Chinese, we've talked about some other Chinese scale or some Indonesian scale, and then you want to come back into it, or wherever your mind might be taking you at the moment, that, those, some of the basic concepts can really help you overcome some hurdles as you start experimenting around with music, and making some beautiful things, or voicing some of your emotions and things like that. So that's the basic concept that you should have in your head right now, with a very basic understanding of the complexities that music theory can be can have inside of the entire concept itself. So I hope that sounds, that makes sense, because I had a lot of issues when I started making the advanced theory videos, that I really wanted to make it very simple, so that later on that you might get to this point, the next point, 2 other videos, and you're done and gone, and you're not sitting there going, oh no, dude, algebra, I don't want to study algebra for 2 years, doing this and study Bach and Beethoven for the next 6 months or 2 years. I know that might sound funny, but, I was trying to give it to you, a little bit at a time, and, in ways that you could understand very simply what was happening in a lot of things. So I hope at this point that you've got that, and you've made some notes, and you've looked around your instrument, and you've maybe done some research on the internet yourself about, things that we haven't gone into yet, like, well, what all chords can I play in the C major scale at what intervals? We'll get into that stuff, but you start digging around in that, because you might be not looking at just basic chord progressions. You might be really, digging into it deep and really searching around. And that's cool. That's what you should do. You should be ahead of class, digging around stuff. We didn't really address that, so you start digging. But don't worry, we'll get into it. The other thing I wanted to address really quick was a strange brew. Okay, so I know that sounds funny, but I'm telling you, you get into, there are some strange brews out there, bro. Really exotic jazz, experimental music, and the list can go on and on and on. And, that kind of stuff can be very difficult to teach. A lot of times it's one of those things that you'll study theory, and you'll be trying to study, and one day you just got it, and you're like, you're off. You don't need to think about that anymore. You're just going wherever you want to go on it, and trying to, it's like, I've made some movie score kind of music that with my teacher, this was years ago, and he'd be like, that sounds great for a music score, but it's wandered out of key, like changed key 4 times, and it's wandered all over the place. It sounds really cool, dude, but it's like all over the place, and that's a real simple concept in your head, because some exotic musics and some experimental musics can go like that in a very strange, unique way that really, it's very hard to deconstruct that. And if you're really into that kind of stuff, it can be very theoretical. You can be listening to it, and those guys can be tight, but it really just sounds like they're off all over the place, and it's like, and it's a huge theoretical experiment and experimentation in theory, and where could they go, and that's a whole nother level of music theory and understanding of music theory. So we're not going to go there too much, but those can be almost mathematical concepts, that they've pieced together and that they call a composition, but it's more like math. They've, strung together these formulas to create this piece of music, with all these other instruments, but sometimes it don't really sound musical, so, but, a lot of times it does. And, you can learn things from that, but don't get too lost in that right now. So I'm hoping that you've gone back, looked at all that stuff, watch these videos on advanced theory before we really start getting into the technical details of some of these things, so that you've got a pretty good understanding of the basics of music theory and the advanced theory concepts that might be happening in composition and things like that, that at least right now you should have a very basic understanding of that. I haven't given you a lot of stuff to chew on or sort through or learn or stuff like that, but at least when you're hearing about it should at this point give you a lot to chew on, to think about, and kind of look around at what's going on and get out your piano or whatever instrument you're playing on and really just kind of experiment around, with the concepts that we've talked about so far, so that as you progress, if you need to, you'll be a lot more comfortable with the progression. You'll be more comfortable with the progression as you get into more complex theoretical concepts and the complexities built from them. And that's a huge thing, because then those steps don't seem so big and it doesn't seem like such a mouthful if you've already gone through all this and you've got a pretty good understanding of what that stuff means in a very basic way, in a very simplistic way. So I hope you enjoyed this series so far, and I just kind of want to address those two things. And I do suggest that you make sure that you've gone through those videos 1 or 2 or 3 times, however many times you need to, and made notes, and very much understand that. If you're on some other instrument, I can't make a channel. I could, but I'm not making a channel right now for every instrument. One concept is that we had talked about is like with the guitar. If you're playing on the guitar and you're not playing on the piano, that even the basic scale here, the basic C major scale, that you've got modes. First of all, you've got modes on keyboards also. We didn't talk a lot about modes, but basically the mode is you've got C major scale, so the Ionian mode is the C scale starting from the root as C. The Dorian mode would be basically the C scale would be D Dorian, and it would be the C scale starting from the root, using the root note as D. And then you'd go to Phrygian, and then you would go to Lydian, then you go to Mixolydian, then you'd go to Locrian, or then you'd go to Aeolian, and then you'd go to Locrian, when there you'd come back to Ionian mode. Those are other concepts, but on the guitar, just to give an example, it can be a little more complicated, because when you're playing around on a guitar, you're playing in the C Ionian mode in this area somewhere, and then all of a sudden you go down to the Lydian mode, and you're down in this area playing in the Lydian mode in the chords that can be played in that mode on the guitar. Whereas on a keyboard, it's a little different. You have to actually visualize it a lot more on the keyboard to see that you're even a different mode. Because a lot of composers and people that are talking to you about theory will say like D Dorian would be, you're basically basing the composition around the D, the D mode and around that chord from the second interval, but it's actually the key is C, but it's D Dorian starting with the second interval of the major second interval of that scale. Those concepts can get a little more complicated, and it can depend on what instrument you're playing on also, and what of that may apply or may not apply. We'll get into a whole lot of that stuff, and as we get through a lot of the basic major advanced theory concepts, we'll start looking at different instruments. But if you understand those concepts on the piano, that it's going to be a whole nother step to look at that on the guitar, because of the way it's built. So we're not going to address that right now, but we will. But the basic concepts of what's happening in the theory and the intervals and scales and notes and chords and a key and all that kind of stuff, the basic concepts can be real simple and easy to explain to somebody on a keyboard, because it's real easy to see, and it's like having one guitar string, that you can play all kinds of notes at the same time on, and it's really cool to explain on the keyboard like that. But when you go to some other instrument, then you basically got to transpose that from that instrument to whatever instrument you're working on, so that it's the concepts work you can visualize the concepts on the instrument that you're working on, and visualize those concepts on that instrument. That's a whole nother thing that we'll talk about, that we're already talking about. So those basic concepts are real simple. Some of the more complex concepts can be, you know, like we're talking about here on the guitar, is that, you know, you're talking about, like, a lot of times on you got a C major scale, and you'll be playing a bar chord, which would be this C, the fifth, the octave again, this major third, and then you can be playing this G, which is the fifth again, and you're going to be playing that C root again and playing those notes with your hand barred across the guitar, playing a bar chord. Well, it actually works out to, the concept of it is it's an inversion. It's basically an inversion on the fourth string. It's a triad inversion on the fourth string with doublings on top of it. So, you know, and I'm not going to get into it real deep, but those things can happen all over the place in theory, depending on the instrument you're working on and what you're doing. Inversions, all kinds of things, like, you know, those are simple concepts, but what's happening with them on this other instrument and what you're able to do on it, and, you know, what other theory might be able to be applied to that instrument itself that may not be applicable to some other instrument, is another concept and level of theory. So, you know, it's a really good idea to figure out what instrument you want to play on. I mean, the keyboard, like I said, is a really good place to learn your basic theory. And then, you know, when you start getting into what instrument you're going to play, and you have to, there can be other theoretical concepts that can be applicable just to that instrument. You know, in lots of concepts that we've talked about already be differently applied, or with different concepts that can be used on that instrument. That's something we'll address also as we go along, but we're just trying to deal with theory. You applying it to some other instrument, we'll get into that later. We're just, right now, the basic theory that can be applied to is just music theory. It's not specific to any type of instrument or any specific instrument. So I hope you enjoyed the series so far, and I hope you got a good taste of advanced theory and the basic concepts involved and things we'll be doing and things we'll be dealing with. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to the next level. We are going to start, you know, deconstructing and reconstructing some of the advanced musical theory concepts in a way that is a little bit more detailed and a little bit more theoretical in nature, whereas it's going to be more visual with actual with notation and things like that, so that the visualization and the understanding of some of these theoretical things we're talking about is a little bit more formal. So that's kind of where we're going in the next step. So peace, hope, love. I hope you enjoyed the series so far, and I'll see you in the next video.